Hi, my name is Linus, and today we're going to be talking about the cinematography of Porsche Compete, shot by DP Khaild Mohtaseb. And I'm Matt Workman, Linus's co-host. This is indeed the Cinematography Database show, and we are going to be talking about the cinematography of Porsche Compete. This is a really cool commercial shot by my friend Khaild. We've known each other a while in New York, and Khaild's gone on to do some amazing work. And this is his latest commercial, so we're going to break it down. This was directed by Mark Jenkinson of Rogue Films, produced by Tom Farley. And I also want to start mentioning where people are currently represented or signed to. Khaild is signed to Artistry. So check out Artistry Agency. Pretty cool stuff. Let's watch some of the commercial, and then we're going to get right into breaking it down. Yes, we are. Yes, we are. It's really cold up here in my attic, so that's why I'm wearing a vest, and he's kind of shivering. So I'm going to bring him back downstairs, actually, before we do this. But check this out. Okay, Linus, I'll bring you back downstairs.
Greatness comes from within, from pitting you against you. You against you. You against you. Until the greatest version of you emerges victorious. Introducing the new Porsche 911, the only car that can beat the 911.
Well, welcome back. I was actually planning on having Linus stay with me for the whole show, but like I said in the intro, it's actually like really cold, and in the attic is usually where I record this stuff. It's usually pretty warm, but for some reason today it's just not that warm. I'm in a vest, so I had to let Linus go, so sorry about that. But what we can do is start to break down this here cinematography. So this is a really cool commercial, you know, and I wanted to start doing some breakdowns of the commercials, but I wanted to wait till I found a really cool one, and this is a cool one. So let's get into it. So here's our intro. Here's our cover page. Hand-drawn, lovely, of course. And here's our slate. I like it when there's behind-the-scenes videos or pictures of the slate. It just makes it feel like a good way to start our breakdown. So like I said, we have our director, Mark Jenkinson from Rogue Films, and we have Khaild, who is from Artistry. And not a lot else to say here, but it's a nice picture of a slate. I like slate pictures. And here is a great way to start this off. Here is Khaild right here. And this is Mark. I don't personally know Mark, but I'm guessing that's him. I think that's him because he's got the director's monitor. And there's a couple of things that I wanted to point out in just this photo before we get into like the first scene of this commercial. And this is kind of like where technology has like really allowed us to work, I think, better as filmmakers. And that is, I can't really see what the transmitter is. You guys tell me if you know what this is, but we have basically a wireless monitor here. So there's no cable going to that, and it's being powered off of this battery here. And it's got these antennas to pick up the signal. Woo, space. And this is great. And, you know, like, before you had to have a cable, and I don't even know if monitors, you know, far enough back, they didn't really even have ways to power them like this. That was battery. So Khaild can just walk around free and with no wires, nothing attached to him, and then Mark can watch the scene. And that's amazing. You know, that has freed up so much. That has freed up the director and the DP to be more creative and to be more spontaneous. It's easier just to walk around and to find the shots. So that's something I wanted to kind of call out now, especially if this is being watched like in the future or something like that. It's like this is kind of relatively new to be able to do this, you know. So I'm guessing there's like a bolt in there, bolt wireless or Paralinks or one of those. Again, we have our Cinetape here to help our focus puller. I don't know what lens this is. It says 50 mil on it, and I'm kind of guessing it's one of the Panavision anamorphics, but I didn't really check. I'd also believe a Lomo anamorphic. I didn't get a second to speak to Khaild about this. We tried to link up, but it didn't quite work. He just got back from Asia, and he's got some other exciting news that I won't talk about here. But yeah, I don't know exactly what lenses this is, but it's clearly anamorphic, and it's got some cool flares, and maybe I'll just leave that to be Khaild's secret sauce. I think he owns some Lomos, though, I forget. Another thing that we'll see later on is that he's using, this is an Alexa XT. It's got the airy, I call it like the 435 gray handles. I'm not sure exactly what they were from, but it's a cool handle. You can start and stop from it. It's very like built with rosettes and very strong. You can pick up like the whole camera from that. Awesome, like it a lot. And then we'll see he's wearing an Easy Rig here, which is basically like a big, like springy thing with a rope that comes down. You grab the camera with it, grab it here, and it takes the weight off of it, so it's kind of floaty, and it doesn't like, you don't have to physically be holding it. It gives you a little bit more freedom. At the trade of like when you're walking with it, sometimes if you're not using like a Flow Cine or one of those like step dampeners, it's a little swingy and bouncy. Or maybe I'm just bad at it. I'm sure his footage isn't that swingy. And just to write this out, it's easy. This is, I believe it's actually written out like that. So it's not actually it's not that. It's not easy like the letters. It's easy written out. So that's kind of a long intro. So we're gonna break down 3 scenes. There's a bunch of stuff in this commercial, but we'll break down 3 scenes that I found some cool behind the scenes of, and I think I understand the lighting and the approach for it. And then we'll end with a special surprise. So go watch the commercial if you haven't already. I need to remember to link to that below, but go watch the commercial and then come back and I'll show you the surprise at the end. So here's one of the first scenes, and it's the chest scene. And this scene is warm overall, so that's what I'm going to call it. It's a warm scene. It's supposed to feel like it's completely lit by these chandeliers here, or these are wall sconces, and then we have this big like perfume bottle looking chandelier. Really pretty. It's out of focus, and what's happening on top of it being out of focus and using kind of like a, I don't know if this is like really like, it's kind of like a vintage anamorphic lens. So there's a little bit of softness happening already. There's a generous amount of atmosphere in this room, and that's what Roger Deakins and a lot of DPs talk about when they say like they don't need to use soft lenses. They can soften the lighting. A lot of the times they mean adding atmosphere, so haze, that sort of thing. It's a pretty cool scene. I really like it. And actually the scouting of this room was like kind of perfection on Khaild and Mark's part, in that they have these wall runners. I think these actually might be bookshelves. So he's kind of looking up at this point. But these really help weight the room down, you know, so they're dark, and they kind of, dark shapes like this, they anchor the scene to the floor. I think it does that. Whereas above is a little bit lighter. There's these like interesting textured wallpapers and the curtains. Pretty cool scene. And then this is the intro shot. I think this is like one of the first shots. When we have a silhouetted person like this and they're walking into the scene, we're following them from behind. They're silhouetted, and the question is, who is this? You know, that's what's being set up here. And why is this person walking into this incredibly ornate room? You know, so it's kind of like there's a montage in the beginning of like all these like kind of close-ups and silhouetted shots, and it's like, who is this person? It's a cool way of getting you interested and asking you questions as a viewer before they start just giving you all the imagery. So I thought this was a really strong frame to start with. Next, this shot, if you watch the commercial, is actually a push-in, so the dolly is moving through the doors here. So it's literally like the doors like open and like they're like welcoming you in, that sort of thing. And there's just a lot of great production design here, like these ornate handles on the doors. This tells you something about the room. The same chandeliers here. This one's kind of weird. I like these lamps, very symmetrical. You know, we have this symmetry going on here. I guess this kind of breaks it up. Maybe there is one there as well. I'm not sure. But what we do see is, again, this kind of like warm room. There's a little bit of atmosphere. And basically all I think that Khaild's really adding in this scene, I think in the close-ups they add a little bit more, is there's basically these 2 sources from the top. And we'll see exactly what those are in a second, but they're giving this rim light here, a little bit on the face, a little bit on the face, and then same thing here. And this is called cross back rim lighting. It's cross back rim lighting if it's like one person, but this is like cross keying actually is the term. I forgot all of a sudden. It's cold in here, okay? So my brain's not working and my Photoshop hand is kind of cold. But this is cross key lighting when you do this. So his backlight is his key light, and then his key light or his backlight is his key light. So using two lights, they're kind of doing double duty. These are actually the same person, so there's even a little bit more trickery going on, but we won't get too deep into the VFX until the end. So that's what's going on in this shot. This is a cool shot. Go watch the actual video. What's happening is the camera's actually pushing through these chess pieces. And if you're using something like a GoPro, that's not that difficult, but when you're using something like an Alexa XT, I'm going to just draw over this right now. Picture that this is a chessboard with a chess piece that's like this big. Well, an Alexa XT body is like that big, if not bigger. And the lens is like this. So you actually can't get this big of a lens like to fit through chess pieces that are this small. So how do we do shots where you want to move a big camera like this through little things like that? How do we do that? How did Khaild do it? It's something called, oh, this is going to be so boring to watch me write this. If you can read that, it says Inavision, and the lens is a Probe 2. The Probe 2. Sorry for the handwriting. My hand is cold and I'm trying to write better, but that's how it came out. And what this basically is instead of using a big lens like that, where I can't really break down how optically this is really working, but let's just say for illustration that the film plane is there. Now this is not actually how optics works, but say that that's where like the point of view of the camera is. Like that's where you are seeing from, you know, is from that film plane. It's not really how it works, but you can think of it that way for now. Well, to put this film plane in your point of view in here, like inside of these chess pieces, you have to move the camera into the chess piece, and you can't do that. It's just too big. So what Khaild used was called an Inavision probe, and this is actually called a borescope. It's called a borescope. That's what this is. There's different types of optics contraptions like this, but this straight one is called a borescope. And there's a little lens at the end, and what it essentially does is, because it's a bunch of relays of mirrors, we're essentially putting the film plane here, or the point of view of the camera is actually down there with this very small lens, and that small lens can actually fit through like little chess pieces or like a little hole. So, you know, 9 times out of 10 when they're doing shots like this, it's using a borescope, and there's a bunch of different types. But Khaild used the Inavision Probe 2, which I've actually used before in New York. And it's a little bit, like, soft and vintagey, but I think given the vibe of this commercial, I think it works pretty well. And whoever did the focusing nailed this shit, because when you're pushing straight in with a Inavision Probe, there's no witness mark, so it's literally all just, like, using the force. Tricky focus pull. Let's move here. We'll get back into, like, what some of the lighting. There's a good behind-the-scenes photo that kind of talks about it, but again, we have our chandeliers out of focus, and they're pretty ovally, which really kind of shows that this was an anamorphic shoot. And again, this kind of like far side lighting, so the lighting is coming from this direction versus coming from here would be near side lighting. This isn't the most dynamic way to light things, kind of in general. It leaves this side to be a bit of a silhouette, and then this side has light information on it to show a little bit more of the form. So we have this kind of this far side key happening here, and I'm kind of calling out on his hand and his face and his shoulder where the actual like hard light is coming from. Pretty cool. Same warm scene going on. Here's a close-up. Really interesting lens. I think this is the 100mm lens that I saw him using. Really cool oval bokeh, and even though this is in focus here, everything else is soft, and it gives this kind of energetic and ethereal look to this whole thing. And this is the flare happening here. Pretty cool. A little bit of veiling happening. So let's get into some behind the scenes. Here is Khaild and Mark. Khaild is using a viewfinder right now, and I think this is the Kish viewfinder. I forget exactly if it's the Kish one or if that's even how you spell it, but it has to have a 2 times D squeeze to be able to look at it properly. And there's not that many viewfinders that do that. That's an interesting lens. Maybe that doesn't look like a Panavision lens, man. That does look like a Kowa. Khaild, are these your Kowa or your Lomo lenses? I forget which ones you own. These feel like not Panavision. They look a little bit more retro-y to me. Pretty cool, special lens. And he's blocking the scene. We're trying to figure out, like, you know, where he's going to put the camera, talk to Mark about it, talking to probably our AD or production team standing in. And there's a little bit of foreshadowing to how the lighting is going to happen in here. So back here, I see 2 Source 4s, ETC Source 4s, so ERS's ellipsoidal reflector lenses. I think that's what they are, something like that. And let's see, so those are going to be our crossback rim lights, and we see some other small tungsten lights, and that's all that really goes down in this scene, you know. The chandeliers do a lot of the work, the location does a lot of the work for you, and then he only adds a little bit of crossback rim lighting / cross keying. So here's a shot of the monitor, pretty standard stuff. I don't know why the shutter is like that, as opposed to 180. I feel like it might be a flickering thing, but I'm not positive. Pretty high ISO, that's the native of the Alexa or Alexa XT. But they kind of needed it because they're using a lot of practical lights and kind of low light levels in general. 3200, pretty straightforward. Moving on here's a great behind the scenes shot from the behind the scenes video, which I'll link you to. Shows Khaild operating the camera, kind of an up angle, and then we see up here are 2, I'm guessing Source 4s, pretty sure, doing the crossback rim lighting. And you can see, because you can see this big hazy beam, that there's a lot of atmosphere in the room, and that's just going to soften everything up. Kind of give some depth to the scene. There's a little bit of atmospheric perspective happening, which basically means that atmospheric perspective basically shows where something that's closer to camera, like this, is darker, has more contrast, like Khaild, versus things that are further from camera, they're a little bit lower contrast. So it's a contrast thing having to do with the distance from the camera. That's what atmospheric perspective does. Really strong, really a strong thing to use as a painter, concept artist, 3D artist, and of course a live action cinematographer. Something else here, it looks like there's a 4x frame of diffusion that might be softening this light from getting to him. So it makes this, instead of it being like this little source from up here, it turns it into this big source, so the lights are actually a little bit broader, a little bit softer, a little bit nicer on the face. So that's likely how this shot is happening. I would guess that this frame is kind of close to that. So there's a little bit of diffusion happening. And you'll see that there's not a lot of highlights in this commercial. Now, I tend to add highlights to everything because I'm going a lot of the times for a very poppy and happy-looking commercial, versus this is a little bit more realistic. So I think a lot of realistic natural lighting and dramatic lighting, you actually shy away from the type of keying where you would have a reflection of the key in the eye, which is the eye light. So not a lot of that happening here. Another really great behind-the-scenes still. This is from Khaild's Tumblr page, which I could link to as well. You can see a really great shot of the Chapman dolly, O'Connor head, Alexa XT, pretty sure, and Khaild's special sauce, 50 mil, and pretty cool. Again, the diffusion frame here, it looks like there actually is a source on the floor down here to help wrap the light around. So for the close-ups, he added a little bit of fill. And again, same setup. And what to talk about here, this looks like a 4x4 of, like, instead of it being like a poly or a beadboard, which is very like matte and very diffused, this is a little bit more like, I don't know, like Grifflin or something like that, or clay coat. It's shiny, it's very specular, you can see the reflections, but it's also, you know, pretty white and kind of bunched up. So it's just another way of adding a little bit of fill light, which you can see a little bit of like return light on his face here. That same kind of key light wrapping around for, I guess it would be for him, but it's also doing a little bit of backlight on the chest pieces. And then we see here kind of an interesting 100 mil. I don't know what 100 mil this is. So that's everyone's homework here, is to figure out what lenses Khaild's using. So let's move out of this scene. So that was the chest scene, and I like that scene a lot. It's very warm, and that kind of brings me to this scene, which is like kind of a contrast to it, a contrast to that scene that I would call blue, obviously. So we have that warm chest scene, and then we have this blue palette here. And actually, I wanted to do this. I didn't do it on the other one. Is do some of this. So we have, just to draw out some of the colors that are happening here. And then they're kind of placing her skin tone around there. So there's a little bit of green in it. Pretty interesting. And then we have our floor, which is red. And basically this blue is added in color correction. There's really no way. I mean, you could put like a LUT in, but you can't really tint the sky blue. It's not really possible. So most likely the sky is actually pretty a neutral black, and they're tinting the blacks blue in flame. Actually, I think this commercial looks like it was finished in flame. Maybe they went to a Resolve, and I actually just installed Resolve recently, and I'm going to start doing some content and some videos on how to do color correction and how to talk about lighting, how to talk about color and the words that we use as cinematographers. When we're talking with VFX people, when we're talking with our colorists, there is like kind of a universal language for color and for lighting, and I'm going to start to talk about that and break that down in DaVinci Resolve. But this is a nice dark scene. There are these bright sources and practicals, and this is something I'm really starting to notice about a lot of high-end work, is that practicals always play a part, and especially in dramatic work. So there's this thing, and we're going to talk about it more in the next setup with the Boxer, but if you're doing a dark scene, you typically do want to have a white source, like something that's 100% bright and white. And it helps keep the scene from feeling muddy. Like if you don't have a white source, things feel muddy. And I can kind of break that down a little bit later. But in this scene, she's basically not really being lit from the front side. So again, we're doing far side lighting. Likely from just one of these, or maybe like there's a source up here giving her a little bit of this hard backlight. This is a very hard backlight here. And then there's also a little tiny bit of blue. Sorry. There's a little bit of blue happening here. And it's a nice look, really cool. Just going with the backlight, finding a location that has this kind of cool orange stuff happening with some green under it. Cool location, really shallow depth of field, practicals. I like it. This is the blue scene, the blue tennis scene. And here's looking at that 50mm again, likely. Again, there's some practicals that are going to give you some of that flare, some cool city lights in the background. Those could be added in post. Not sure. There's some post in this commercial. I think you're starting to get that idea that I'm talking about that. But then there's also, we see that because she's being keyed from here, which looks like a pretty hard lighting source, I'd have to say. It could be just one of these, like up here, like this. Doesn't really matter, but she's being keyed with some white light. And I think all of this atmosphere in here, that's the lens actually veiling and flaring out. So it's a cool lens, adds a little bit of fake atmospheric perspective by having flares like this. And I think that's kind of what happens with the flaring that people really like, is that if you didn't haze the room, it gives you a little bit of that hazy feel. Again, with the atmospheric perspective. That's the name of this episode, is atmospheric perspective. I wasn't even planning on talking about that. So here's kind of the proof. If you look at, not that the behind the scenes video tells you everything, but you can see that the sky is actually black. And the scene is a lot whiter overall. The blacks are a lot whiter, so it definitely was color correction to add this much blue into the blacks, like it usually is. And what I wanted to call out here was that this is a Scorpio crane. I don't know the length. It might be like a 30 something. I didn't look it up. And this is the Scorpio. I think this is the mini Scorpio head. And this looks like it's a 3-axis head. It looks like it's a 3-axis head. I'm not sure. And it's basically, I'm pretty sure that's the non-stabilized one, so it doesn't have like that constant, I guess we didn't really talk about stabilized heads in the show yet, but we'll get there. It's kind of a advanced topic. But what's interesting about this camera move, if you go watch the behind the scenes, is that it's moving in towards her and kind of wrapping around, but you'll notice that it's pointed not straight at her. Sorry again. So why isn't this pointed at her, And this comes down to keep, like when you're learning about techno cranes and camera moves, what's happening is that they're keeping her on the left side of the frame. And if they pointed it directly at her, she'd be in the center, but they're keeping this very third so that the left side is one tennis player and the right side is the other tennis player. It has to do with the 180 rule. So when you're doing a move like that, it's moving in, but it's keeping her off axis, and you have to know that as the head operator. And the key grip or the crane grip to look at this and to look at that and to kind of know what's happening. It's pointed away from her because that keeps her in the left third of frame. And we'll talk more about techno crane moves. I have all the techno cranes built in 3D. They move like real world techno cranes, and I can use them to show you how to do techno crane moves and what it looks like and how you have to do that to get certain techno crane moves, which is, it's kind of important because it's hard to learn how to use a technocrane, like why would you want to use a technocrane? What kind of moves can it do that other things can't do? You're pretty far in your career before you start having technocranes on commercials. So I'll be doing some content on that. Again, with the third here, we have our Scorpio in the background over here. Just a cool behind the scenes shot. Like, I love all the city stuff. So the city was real, it looks like. They didn't paint it in. And just a cool monitor shot. A couple things to point out. There's 20 frames per second, so they did a little bit of trickery, so it does a little bit of the monsters, like a little bit of sped up action, which is cool. And the ISO is back to 500 and 3800 for the white balance. Maybe some of the lights here are a little bit cooler. Maybe they're like sodium vapor or something like that. Again, practicals flare, add a little bit of atmosphere to the scene, and then look how low Khaild exposes on the exposure. I would be up here, like that. But with this kind of look, there's a lot to be said about exposing low on the waveform and just capturing all of that detail. And it has to do with the relationship here. And then the final color grade. There's a lot of things happening, but I wanted to just point that one bit out right there. So this brings us to our last scene, but not the last section. This is the boxing scene, and this is the main setup of the commercial, I would say, and I'll show you why in the end. So overall, this is a pretty dark scene. Like, if you look at this down here, that's all black. This is all black. And then up here, this is pretty dark. I'm not going to go in. I was going to pull this into Resolve to kind of break it down at that level, but I don't think this show has the time for that. But what I wanted to call out here is that we actually have pretty bright and also pretty saturated practicals. There's these warm ones below, and there's these, which we'll talk about, but then there's this as well, which is kind of like a fluorescent, though the color kind of makes it feel like it's like a mercury vapor. Kind of blue-green, I want to say gross color, you know, like, not that this commercial is gross, but like typically when you're doing commercials and movies, you're like, oh, there's these green fluorescent or green mercury vapor lights, and it's like, ugh, I gotta go balance the green out or like deal with that in color correction. Here they just kind of embraced it, and they might have actually just added it on top of it, so we have this cool color contrast. So in this case, they're using it on purpose, and they're using it selectively. It's not a mistake, obviously. And then we have these, again, source 4s as these backlights, and they have this warm color. And these are kind of like, whereas these are like metal halide, these are like mercury vapor, which are warmer. Even though they're just tungsten lights, they kind of feel like, to me in color correct, they've been pushed towards mercury vapor. And we see the same kind of color palette out here happening. I'm trying to grab this lighter color. I can't do it. Basically, we have this green on red or green on orange color palette happening. So we have the green mercury halide and then like the red mercury vapor. I'm getting it mixed up. One's red, one's green. So there's this cool color contrast between green and red, or kind of green and orange happening. And the way that you kind of make scenes like this work, in my opinion, when you're doing dark scenes, is to make sure that you have a bright reference in here somewhere. And the easiest way to do that is to use practicals. And that's what's going on. We have some other lights happening out here that kind of feel like street light. Again, like the mercury vapor warm street light happening. And then the inside light is this green. There is an amazing behind the scenes photo that shows the exact lighting setup of what's happening. So I guess I'll save that till then. But there is a little bit of back top light happening as well on our boxers. Really cool wide shot. Really cool scene. This is my favorite scene of the whole commercial. We'll get back to how this was actually lit, but what I wanted to call out here is that you'll see that if you actually did a straight down shot of this lighting, it wouldn't look like this. There would be a lot of other shadows, but you'll notice here it's like all of a sudden there's this one shadow. That's what you usually do for straight down shots, because you've lost all the depth that's usually there. You know, you're just looking at this flat plane looking straight down. So you tend to want to like simplify the forms, you know, so there's just one highlight here with a dark side and then one shadow. It's just a cleaner read, even though it's honestly not realistic at all. That's not what a straight down shot would look like. Artistically, you are simplifying the lighting to make it easier to read straight down, and this is a common thing that's done. Next, I'm just gonna pause there for a second. Next, we see our source 4s in the background with the warm light. And you can see subtly in here, there's a little bit of green. Here's it. There's a little bit of green happening here versus this warm. So the green and red color contrast, really cool. We have a soft edge light happening on his hair. That's coming from a source from above. And then this kind of specular edge lighty stuff. Those are coming from, I think, Kino flows on the side, which I've seen. And there's not like a ton of, this warm light kind of makes it like here, I think, like this, these warm highlights here, that's what's happening. But then this light, actually, this color and this color and this color and this and this and this, there's a light source above them, which we'll look at in a second. But yeah, this frame, there's other things happening in this frame, but we'll get to that in a second. Here's our wide shot. So breaking it down, we have these what seem to be fluorescent sources. Honestly, I'm going to grab a different color. They look like fluorescents because they're like long and tube-like. They might be gelled green, gelled with this mercury halide kind of green color. And that's providing like a pretty low light level of green to the whole scene. And then we actually see that these are actually just source 4s on stands, I think. And you can see how much atmosphere is in the room. You can see the beams. Here's some 4x4 Kinos with that same red, adding a little bit of edge light, a little bit of face light. And then above them, it feels like there's this same kind of green source inside of this skylight here. So this is like a 12x12 with a some sort of source inside of it. And then it's being skirted off so that this light does not hit the walls. That's what the skirt is for, that black fabric around it. So it's just going straight down. And it's either a white source or it's this same sort of green fluorescent. And what else is there to see here? Boom operator. Quite a job to have to get all the way in there. There's also, this is the person operating the head. And, which might be Khaild? I can't tell. And we have our Scorpio crane again here with our, looks to be 3-axis Scorpio head. Though I didn't see any 3-axis moves in this commercial. So that's the lighting. And we also have some practicals down here, which I wanted to call out. These really hold it down. I really like these orange practicals. Like, they look like they're part of the location. They might have added them. I don't know. But we have this orange down here that's kind of reflected in the crossback rim lights and some side lights here. And then we have the green to kind of contrast that. This is how they lit the overhead shot. This is a picture from Khaild's Tumblr again. You see all the other lights are effectively off. But they created this one big large light source out of this. This is pretty much a maxi brute. Though it looks like it has, maxi brutes have 9. This has 12. It looks like there's like 4x3. And again, that's to do this lighting. So you can picture that it's over here, and pushing that way. That's how they created that single source. Finishing up with the behind the scenes part, really cool behind the scenes again, picture of Khaild operating with his Easy Rig. Mark, the director, with the wireless monitor. So much freedom. The wireless follow focus. Here's our first AC pulling focus. Really cool. And everyone's in the ring together, which is funny. I've shot a couple boxing things. It's always a little bit like, hope I don't get knocked out today. Oh, maybe that's the power drop. It's weird that these lines are there, but they don't show up in the final thing. And they had probably the budget to paint them out if they wanted to. Another cool shot of the source 4 with the red gel in it. And this takes us to our last behind the scenes shot for the live action. And what I want to call out here, besides the fact, there's 2 things I wanted to call out here. One is that Khaild operates like a boss, really cool way. So we have the Easy Rig, but then he's also grabbing the map box, which is like the old school operator way of doing it. Like old school operators would just grab the map box, like no handles, no Easy Rig, none of that. They just grab it. And there's this one-to-one thing where like you just are holding the lens. You just one-to-one. It feels like it's part of your body. So he's half doing that with his left hand. But on the other hand, he has the Aries stop and start, so he's holding it like this, and I think that's really cool. I think it's like a really hybrid, modern way, if I can say that, of operating the camera. Oh, there's a little bit of sunlight on my hand. I don't know if you guys can see this. But the last thing I wanted to call out, I can't tell how long this is right now. Doesn't feel too bad. You see that there's these little dots on their faces, right? Subtle. It's like, oh, is it sweat? Like, what are those dots on their face? Why are there dots on these guys' faces, like kind of near their hairline? What's going on? Well, this brings us to the secret that I was talking about before. I'm gonna close this up, and we're gonna talk about some stuff here. So, what you'll see is that, in all the other scenes, they use the real people, but this one looks like a young Muhammad Ali. And there's two of them. That's like the whole point of this commercial, is that like the only person that can beat you is you. That's the idea of the whole commercial. So how are they having these two actors look like Muhammad Ali so well? What's going on here? There's some funny business happening. And here's another great shot of looks like Muhammad Ali again. And it doesn't really look like the actors that they were shooting. So what happened here? If you watch the behind the scenes, they call it out. They did face replacements in CG, which I 100% did not catch the first time I watched this commercial. I think it's so visceral. It's so, there's some fast editing at the end. Like, you really don't notice it. Or at least I didn't notice it. Maybe you guys did. And what this is Maya in here. This 3D program is called Maya, and Maya is where I live all day when I'm doing my 3D cinematography designer previs. I am in Maya constantly. So it brings a big smile to my face, as you can probably see right now, to see multiple monitors all running Maya. I love that. I love that there's Maya here. And the fact that there's a vertical monitor like this means that there's a programmer somewhere. And I need to get a vertical monitor too for when I'm doing my programming, using a Wacom tablet. I love this. I love it. So they have a CG version of Muhammad Ali, and they basically track the CG face onto our actors, believe it or not. Really cool that they showed this as well. This is Flame, I believe. Or it's at least one of the Autodesk compositing programs, and you can see that they're using some qualifiers here to kind of color correct the CG into the live plate, which is really tricky to do. That's the compositor's job. If you've never heard of a compositor, these days they work in 3D a lot too, but mainly like 2D compositing, like putting a CG 2D plate over a live action plate and making them blend together. Really important, though the line of what they do is being blurred every day between 3D colorists, compositors. They're all starting to do the same thing in the software suites like Resolve, like I'll be doing content on pretty soon. They're all starting to do each other's work. But again, I thought it was cool to see this to see this Flame workflow. And then here is the proof. Here is the before plate. This also kind of shows the color correction that happened here. There's a lot of green in it that they pulled out. Two different actors, first of all, that both don't look like Muhammad Ali, but then when they add the CG faces over it, now it looks like Muhammad Ali. So there was some trickery here that I didn't quite catch, but I was really glad that they exposed in the behind the scenes. I thought that was really cool to be able to see the CG work here and how kind of seamless this really is. And this actually goes to talk about a little bit about, to wrap this up here, grab a lighter color. One of the reasons that it's good for CG people like to hide in darkness as far as like matching, like somewhere here there is a line between CG and real. And if you light it this way, if you light it with far side lighting, where the front of the people are dark, not only is that dramatic lighting in general, it's also easier for them to hide that CG and real world seam. So it worked both ways. This is an awesome commercial. I mean, this is like some of the highest level commercials that are out there. It's great directing. It's great shooting, it's great CG, it's great coloring, it's great locations, great acting, everything. It's really nice, and when you watch it, it has this really good, like, the kind of like driving feel to it when you're watching it. I really like this commercial. So that's our look at the cinematography of Porsche Compete with DP Khaild Mohtaseb. Pretty awesome. Definitely go check out all these guys' works. All the people that I mentioned, go check out Mark's work, Khaild's work, check out Artistry, check out Rogue Films. Really good stuff happening on all fronts there. To wrap it up, I'm just going to say again, because of the time of the recording, March 1st, Cine Designer for Photoshop comes out. I've been in a beta program. I've been getting people's feedback from it. It really is just a simple library of symbols, but it's going to allow you to work in scale in Photoshop versus having to go into expensive programs like AutoCAD or Vectorworks, where those programs are a little bit clunky and kind of hard to use, honestly. I think they're a little bit, not outdated, but they're a little bit too difficult and too expensive, whereas Photoshop is pretty affordable. And so you can work in scale, you can use symbols that look really good, and I'm going to make all the symbols in the world. Any symbols that you want added to it, I will build in 3D to scale from my 3D library and then turn them into 2D for you. So check out cinedesigner.com. If you're watching this before March 1st, sign up for the trial, download some of that stuff, play with it in Photoshop, let me know what you want to see. And March 1st, it's coming out. It's going to be on the Cinematography DB online shop. really looking forward to getting it out there into the world and seeing the diagrams that you guys put together. So thanks again. Thank you for watching this. I hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe to the channel. Leave me a comment, like the video, all that good stuff. And I'll see you on the next episode. And maybe if it's a little warmer, I'll keep Linus up here with me. If you guys think that's a good idea. I'll see you guys later. Hello, humans. My name is Linus. And I'm going to be hosting the Cinematography Database show today. Yes, I am. No, you're not. This is my show. This is my show, Linus. It's my show. Just because you're cute and you're furry. Well, you can host it for today. Hey. 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 Oh. I'm actually allergic to dogs. I don't know why I'm doing this.
Greatness comes from within. From pitting you against you. You against you. You against you. Until the greatest version of you emerges victorious. Introducing the new Porsche 911, the only car that can beat the 911.